Let's see here if I can get this filmed correctly or the way I would like. Anyway, so this is me trying to go chapter by chapter, section by section of The Denial of Death by Ernest Becker. Pretty dank book. I'm doing this because I'm coming from a belief system that I should, before I move on to another chapter, try to be able to teach each chapter before I move on to it. This is not really a book you would want to do that with, and I've already gone through the book, I think at least once, kind of 1.5 times. But, and this is not even me really teaching, this is just kind of going through the foreword and reading the foreword. But this, I feel like sums up the book really well and is really potent. So I'm just going to go through this. The foreword was written by Sam Keane. He got to interview Ernest Becker right before he died. And Sam Keane is the author of Fire in the Belly and a couple of other really great books. He's kind of notably known in the kind of men's movement world as kind of a leader there, a thought leader there. Anyway, so the foreword just begins. This is the foreword section I'm going to go through. It simply begins with just praise of Ernest Becker, and then it gets into Ernest Becker's thoughts. Now, it should be taken into account that Ernest Becker was a kind of multidisciplinary character. He took in different ideas from philosophy, psychiatry, psychology, sociology, anthropology, and economics a little bit, and kind of synthesized these ideas in a way that no one has quite done. Anyway, I'll go off. So, he's weaving a lot of different ideas, and he's kind of synthesized ideas and then built upon them. And these are kind of the four, as Sam Keane put it, and I agree with him, four foundational ideas that he used the analogy of weaving a basket. So we're going to go through strand 1, and is the first strand by Sam. The first strand: the world is terrifying. To say the least, Becker's account of nature has little in common with Walt Disney. Mother Nature's a brutal bitch, red in tooth and claw, who destroys what she creates. We live, as Ernest Becker says, in creation in which the routine activity of organisms is tearing others apart with teeth of all types, biting, grinding flesh, plant stalks, bones between molars, pushing the pulp greedily down the gullet in delight, incorporating its essence into one's own organization, and then excreting the foul stench and gases the residue. So that was kind of Mother Nature. Now, strand 2 is the second strand, and this is has to do with more psychological. The basic motivation for human behavior is our biological need to control our basic anxiety, to deny the terror of death. Now, this one is pretty interesting because I feel like we all do this to a certain extent, and it's how we, I think control freaks are on the exaggerated spectrum of this, but it's a good way of looking at it, is that they're constantly trying to control, usually their outside world, so their inside world feels good, so they feel safe, so they don't have anxiety. Now, there's other people that get really into different introverted type activities and try to control that anxiety through other forms of trying to reframe your thoughts and beliefs, and just it's all mental, and those are two far different spectrums of the same dealing with trying to control. Anyway, I'll go on with this paragraph. Human beings are naturally anxious because we are ultimately helpless and abandoned in a world where we are fated to die. This is the tear: to have emerged from nothing, to have a name, consciousness of self, deeper inner feelings, and excruciating inner yearning for life and self-expression, but with all this yet to die. That's we'll talk about this later, but that's sort of the underlying theme of a lot of his work. The third strand, and weaving this basket: since the terror of death is so overwhelming, we conspire to keep it unconscious. The vital lie of character is the first line of defense that protects us from the painful awareness of our helplessness. Every child borrows power from adults and creates a personality by interjecting the qualities of godlike being. If I'm like my all-powerful father, I will not die. It's like the superhero. It's like kids dressing up as superhero. So long, and most parents are the superhero when the kids are very little. So long as we stay obediently within the defense mechanism of our personality, what William Reich called character armor, we feel safe and able to pretend that the world is manageable. That's just like, I have to stop there and just pause and can relate to that. As long as I do everything and I'm good, life feels good and manageable. Again, trying to control. And using character armor, I think goes a little bit deeper in this reference. I'm not familiar with William Reich's idea on this. I'll go do some research and figure that out. But essentially is like, I have a certain mythology to play out. I have a certain activity or task. I'm going to be a good doctor. I'm good at being a good doctor. And I feel good. And like, I create a falsehood of what's important. I say that I need to have a nice car and all this stuff. And in reality, it's just a distraction, a sense of symbolic distraction from the deep-seated fear of death. It later goes on, but the price we pay is high. We repress our bodies to purchase a soul that time cannot destroy. We sacrifice pleasure to buy immortality. We encapsulate ourselves to avoid death, and life escapes us while we huddle within the defended fortress of our character. And it later goes on to talk about what I was referring to. Society provides the second line of defense against our natural impotence of creating a hero system that allows us to believe that we transcend death by participating in something of lasting worth. Again, like my example of a doctor, you're now part of something. We achieve immortality by sacrificing ourselves to conquer an empire, to build a temple, to write a book, to establish a family, to accumulate fortune, to go further progress and prosperity, to create an information society and global free market. Since the main task of human life is to become a heroic and transcend death, every culture must provide its members with an intricate symbolic system that covertly religious. This means that the ideological conflicts between cultures are essentially battles between immortality projects. Let's see, how much time do I have on this? Alright, cool. Let's see if he goes on about this. Becker's. So, that means ideological conflicts between cultures are essentially battles between immortality projects, holy wars. Now, this is easily could be described in the Crusades of literally killing off infidels and making sure that one ideology lives out beyond other. This could also be described in free market capitalism when we have to go to war and fight communists. Next, Sam Keene writes, one of Becker's lasting contributions to social psychology has to help us understand that the corporations and nations may be driven by unconscious motives that have little to do with their stated goals. Let me rephrase that because that's huge. One of Becker's lasting contributions to social psychology has been to help us understand that corporations and nations may be driven by unconscious motives that have little to do with their stated goals. Making a killing in business or on the battlefield frequently has less to do with our economic need for or political reality than with the need of assuring ourselves that we have achieved something of lasting worth. Of our immortality project, it's saying that we have to have an immortality project of some nature, and us going out and doing this is corporations playing off our our unconscious death fear that that seems to manifest itself in these immortality projects. Consider, for instance, the recent war in Vietnam, in which the United States was driven not by realistic economic or political interests, but the overwhelming need to defeat atheistic communism. That is the example I just gave. The fourth strand, this is the last strand of the four strands, our Our heroic projects that are aimed at destroying evil have the paradoxical effect of bringing more evil into the world. So, our projects, the Crusades are a great one, of making utopia, God's world, end up bringing more evil into the world. Human conflicts are life and death struggles. My gods against your gods. My immortality project against your immortality project. The root of humanly caused evil is not man's animal nature. So he's throwing out basic ideas right here of what is the root of evil. And it's not animal man's nature. So it's not like the nature that we picked up from monkeys, not territorial aggression or innate selfishness. It's not that we're just horribly selfish, which most of us are, but our need to gain self-esteem. So this is like, I think the big differentiation is that it's our need to gain, because it's like we have, as Maslow would put it, a hierarchy of needs, and we have a need of gaining self-esteem. It's not quite the same. You could be like, well, that's selfish, but it's like, no, there's a certain internal need, and this is a need that, like, it seems like most animals don't need. Deny or don't have is better said, and achieve our heroic self-image. Deny our mortality and achieve our heroic self-image. So it's a interesting because it's a heroic. We need to have heroism, but like it's a self-image, what we think of ourselves, and that's like ultimately that drives the organism of the human. Because if everyone else finds us a hero, but we absolutely don't, it's not going to be a long-lasting hero system. We're not going to go on that far doing that. Our desire for the best is the cause of the worst. We want to clean up the world, make it perfect, keep it safe for democracy or communism, purify it of the enemies of God, eliminate evil, establish an alabaster city, undimmed by human tears or 1,000-year reach. Perhaps Becker's greatest achievement has been to create a science of evil. He has given us a new way of understanding how we create surplus, evil, warfare, ethnic cleansing, genocide. From the beginning of time, humans have dealt with what Carl Jung called their shadow side, feelings of inferiority, self-hate, guilt, hostility, by projecting it onto the enemy. It has remained for Becker to make crystal clear that the way in which warfare is a social ritual for purification of the world, in which the enemy is assigned the role of being dirty, dangerous, atheistic. I would go further on. Becker's radical conclusion that it is our altruistic motives that turn the world into a carnal house, our desire to emerge with larger whole, to dedicate our lives to a higher cause, to serve cosmic powers, possess a disturbing revolutionary question to every individual nation. At what cost do we purchase the assurance that we are heroic? No doubt one reason Becker has found no, alright, I'm going to skip that part. But it's pretty interesting. I like the idea of what are we doing to gain our self-esteem or our heroic myth? How are we being a hero? At what cost is it to other people to purify the world in the way we see it? This is where I think this book is of great importance, because he gives somewhat of a solution for this. And it's not a utopic one. It's not a one that is pretty, but it's one that resonates with a lot of, I'd say, what's being spoken in certain communities is self-responsibility. We live in an existential world, and it's now deciding what meaning you're going to create and living by principles. He actually goes a little bit further than that. He talks about that after such a grim diagnosis of the human condition, it's not surprising that Becker offers only a palliative prescription, except no miracle cure. Basically saying that, like, this is a part of us, but we can limit the suffering of it. The best we could hope for society at large is that the mass unconscious individuals might develop a moral equivalent to war. The science of man has shown that society will always compose of passive subjects, powerful leaders, and enemies of whom we project our guilt and self-hatred. I totally agree. I think it's very Nietzschean, but true. And not even Nietzsche, it's just true. So, what is there? For the exceptional individual, probably the individual that picks up these books and tries to apply these, people like you watching this indie video that's out of Ernest Becker. For the exceptional individual, there is an ancient philosophical path of wisdom. Becker, like Socrates, advises us to practice dying. Cultivating awareness of our death leads to disillusionment, loss of character armor, and a conscious choice to abide in the face of terror. The existential hero who follows this way of self-analysis differs from the average person in knowing that he or she is obsessed. Instead of hiding within the illusions of character, he sees the impotence and vulnerability. The disillusioned hero rejects the standardized heroics of mass culture in favor of cosmic heroism, in which there is a real joy in throwing off the chains of uncritical, self-defeating dependency and discovering new possibilities of choice and action, and new form of courage and endurance. That one's, I'll talk about that a little bit. Living with a voluntary consciousness of death, the heroic individual can choose to despair or make a Kierkegaardian leap and trust in the sacrosanct vitality of the cosmos, in the unknown God of life whose mysterious purpose is expressed in the overwhelming drama of cosmic evolution. An ethic that is universal rather than ethnic. Whether we will use freedom to encapsulate ourselves in narrow, tribal, paranoid personalities and create more bloody utopias, or form compassionate communities of the abandoned, is still to be decided. So, let's see, do I have any time? I don't have time to blabber. That's pretty much it. I'll probably make more videos on this because I just read the sections I really like, but I'll hopefully summarize it. There's a lot of fat I read, and I could trim the fat to make it more succinct and powerful. So this is part 1 of the forward.